Awesome. Let's begin. Piyush, are you ready?
All set. Thank you everyone for joining.
Awesome. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. At any point of the workshop, if you feel that you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. The session is all about uh, a Q&A session. We are here to answer your doubts. Then even after the webinar, if you feel that you still have questions, you can email it to us and we will answer them promptly. So yes, today we're going to be talking about a very hot topic regarding the modern DevTool GTM, which is about aligning the functions of DevRel, marketing, and sales, and to build a robust GTM to drive growth. Before we dive in, a quick intro about Reo. I mean, some of you have already spoken to us, but before Reo, most of us were developer marketers, and we found that selling to developers beat any SaaS, any tried and tested dev tool GTM playbooks, right? Essentially because dev tools solve a very unique challenge. And if your developers and the ones that you're targeting, they do not have that challenge, they are not going to pay attention to you, right? And it'll be a wasted effort if you keep on chasing them. So that was the thesis behind starting Reo.Dev. Essentially, we capture developer-specific signals, and show you the intel about which developers or which accounts are ready for a sales opportunities. And before we dive in, a quick round of introductions. I'm Mitali. I lead the product marketing team at Reo.Dev.
Hi everyone, I'm Piyush, one of the founders.
Awesome. So let's get straight into it. Now, we all know, being in the DevTool space, that selling to developers is not an easy task, right? It's far away from easy. And we found that there are three important main reasons for this. The first being developer purchase process is very nuanced. Nobody gets up in the morning thinking that, hey, we're going to buy a dev tool product today, right? And hence intent becomes very critical for the dev tool GTM teams to know that when is the right time, who is the right buyer, and what context should I be using to reach out to people. The second thing is dev tools are very technical, right? And the process of evaluation isn't linear. Developers first will try out a product, they will build POCs on it, and only then they will champion it, and then it goes to the budget holders with the CTOs and people higher up, right? So it's a long evaluation cycle. And the third thing is, like I said, there are multiple stakeholders here. The CTOs entrust the developers to first try out the product, and then they have an influence on the purchase decision. Based on the developer's word, they will go ahead with the purchase. And for this to happen, for our DevTool GTM, we feel that we've spoken to a lot of DevTool companies, right? And this complex motion requires a hybrid setup. What I mean by that is, in a dev tool company, there is DevRel, there is marketing, and there is sales. And there is a bottoms-up funnel, which the DevRels are involved with, which is basically the community side of things, where the developer advocacy happens, the DevRel identifies the champions. And there's also a top-down approach that happens, wherein the marketing and the sales reach out to the budget holders. But I feel that, these things need to go hand in hand. I'm going to take a pause here. So Piyush, what do you think? What sort of GTM do you think that works in a developer tool company?
So I think, so for everyone on the call, as a team, we work with more than 35 developer tool GTM teams, and almost 90% agree that we need a hybrid go-to-market motion. You cannot be pushy top-down sales, and you cannot just be doing bottoms-up. So in theory, everybody agrees. But let's look at some of the challenges that we face when building this hybrid GTM motion. And for a moment, let's take on the hat of a salesperson. Now, this person's job is to book meetings with the Fortune 500 or the Fortune 2000, depending on what is your target persona. However, Like Mitali said, developer tools are a very involved purchase. Now imagine you have a hot account that you want to go after, but if that engineering team does not care about your product, you are not going to get a meeting. Let's say we somehow get a meeting with the CTO. The evaluation of the product will always be handed down. The CTO is not going to sit and evaluate. He or she will hand it down to a team of developers to evaluate the product. And at that moment, the deal goes dark. You have no idea what's happening. Evaluation can take 2 months, 6 months, depending on how involved the product is. And again, this puts the sales team in a very difficult position. You have no clue whether the deal is progressing, very hard to predict. And now if we
Right.
take, sorry,
Yeah.
if we take a different lens, right? If we take the bottoms up lens, as a developer advocate, we spend a lot of time in the community, building the advocacy. But oftentimes, the people who are most vocal in the community may not be the customers or may not be the prospective customers. They could be enthusiasts, hobbyists. So is DevRel really spending time where the dollar is, right? Similarly, for marketing, very hard to like have visibility in the funnel. You could be doing a lot of ads, a lot of content marketing, but who's consuming that? Because developers are very good at hiding identities, not revealing themselves. So in theory, building a hybrid motion makes a lot of sense and everybody agrees, but it is much harder to do. And that's what we've seen with multiple DevTool GTM teams.
So Piyush, when I translate this into a funnel, right, I do not see a linear funnel, right, like a traditional SaaS funnel, which is awareness, consideration, conversion, and all. I do not see this as a linear funnel. Am I right in that?
Absolutely. I think traditional SaaS, B2B SaaS, while not easy, but it's been a solved problem for a decade where there's been enough research into identifying what the stages are. There's a lot of visibility available. And practically a lot of the intel sits in your sign up flow. Like the way to try out a B2B product is by signing up. But in developer tools, that's not the case. And that adds to the complexity.
Yeah, and I think the intent signals are way spread out, right? For them to like triangulate and know where things are like at what stage. So just like reveal I think we need to reveal the developer funnel here then.
Absolutely. I think so. This is what we'll spend a lot of time today talking about. One of the ways to solve this problem is a developer funnel. And before I go into what the funnel is, let me talk a little bit about who's built this and where these ideas come from. So if you go to the next slide, a lot of the very successful developer tool companies, for example, HashiCorp, Sneak, Astronomer, they've got big revenue ops and big data science teams who have actually collected data signals from multiple sources and put those signals into building a funnel. And these are companies who have invested in this, really invented the funnel. And what we are doing at Reo is bringing this to teams of all sizes. So let me talk about what this developer funnel looks like. So in a typical DevTool evaluation journey, right, things start with problem realization. This is the first step. Every DevTool is a problem solver. It's not a casual purchase, and therefore it starts with a problem. And at this stage, the developer starts looking for a solution. This is the first step when we got to get in front of the teams. We got to get in front of the right developers. And everybody who has a problem theoretically should discover our product. So we go from problem realization to discovery. At this stage, developers discover our product, they probably discover multiple products, and they go into a deeper evaluation. This evaluation can happen across multiple platforms. It can happen by reading the documentation, by reading technical blogs, product comparison sites, and so on and so forth. And it is our job to make sure that those who discover a product, those developers find it very easy to evaluate it. Once the evaluation is done, 2 or 3 top products are chosen for a trial. Somebody might install the product on the local machine, sign up for a trial, and just give it a spin, do the first hello world to understand how this works. So already, if we see, we are only halfway through the funnel, and there is already so much complexity. Problem realization, very hard to track. Discovery can happen on so many different platforms, developer communities, technical blogs, Google search, forums. Once the discovery happens, evaluation is also incognito. Somebody could be reading your docs No idea they're reading your docs. They could be signing up with a Gmail or a GitHub ID. Again, no idea that somebody from Uber has signed up because it's fully anonymous. They could have deployed your product by doing a Docker pull, and even that remains anonymous. There are products with 50 million Docker pulls, but no visibility into who those people are, who those companies are. And this anonymity, this complexity continues down the funnel, right? In a lot of developer tool products, usage is not equal to purchase. Developers could have started using your community version or your free tier, even deployed your product in production with no clue to the marketing team or the sales team that this team is using my product, and then eventually they might be scaling. So this is what the developer journey looks like. And along the journey, there are purchase intent signals at every stage. For example, for some teams, the signals might come at the evaluation stage itself. This is somebody's evaluating a product, they have an immediate need, they prioritize time over money, and they choose to buy. Or this can happen after the POC stage. In some tools which are generally open source or more infra, this can happen after somebody's adopted your community version. They realize it's taking a lot of time, a lot of effort to manage it or maintain it, and they decide to switch to a managed offering or to a cloud hosted offering. And then finally, more nuanced products, more technical products become very difficult to scale. And that's where revenue opportunities can arise. So this is really the crux of how you can map out the developer buying journey from left to right. At every stage, keep an eye out for the intent signals, revenue intent signals, and then go after those signals. And a good job building this funnel can align DevRel, product marketing, sales, and all of these teams. And that's what we'll talk about next.
Right. So Piyush, how does the GTM team sort of gets divided in terms of their KRAs and KPIs on this journey, right? Because it's not a linear journey for sure. There must be some overlaps happening there.
So Mitali, that is the challenge that we need to address as a DevTool org. So there are 3 or 4 teams going after the same objective, which is revenue growth. There's the DevRel team, the marketing teams, the DevX or product marketing teams, and the sales team. They're all going after the same objective. But if the actions are not orchestrated, we have seen the teams pull in different directions.
Yeah. And I think a major part is the intent signals, right? That come from DevRel, that DevRel spots, and then they sort of trickle it down to marketing. I think intent signals, what are your thoughts on intent signals? Probably we can spend some time talking about that.
There are a lot of intent signals that go into building this. What we've done here is try to map some of these signals that can give you a good clue. These signals are hard to track, but if you can do a good job, and the teams that we have done do a good job of this, they've actually gotten a much better handle on the developer buying journey. So if you see on the left, problem realization or discovery, this can happen on platforms like a Google search, technical blogs, developer forums. This is where typically developers go to find out about products, to find out about solutions. How have other developers solved it? What are the best practices? So this is one part of the puzzle. After this, developers move to evaluation. And at this stage, they would be checking out solutions on GitHub, evaluating multiple product capabilities. Developer documentation is a great source. We see a lot of activity on docs. Interesting fact, from all of the companies we work with, the amount of time spent on the documentation is 90% higher than that spent on the website, all else being equal. So developers spend a lot of time reading the documentation, evaluating products, downloading packages to try it out, and even anonymously signing up. So if these data points are captured, if they are mined properly, if they are de-anonymized, it can give you a very good sense of who needs your product and who's evaluating your product. And then developers might proceed. Sorry, if you go back, then developers might proceed to the next step, which is trying it out. This is very common developer behavior. Like if you are any other B2B SaaS product, the people want to talk to a team who can walk them through how to use it, not developers. Anybody who's been on a call with a developer will know that the moment you try to show a demo, immediately they'll cut you off and start asking questions because they come to the sales call prepared with their questions. And that's because the POC has already been built. So somebody from the engineering team has tried to build a POC. They've tried to see how this thing works. They've done the first hello world. Any questions have already been asked in the community. And the sales call often is just an onboarding call or maybe a pricing discussion. And that can happen too late. Maybe you did not even get a chance to influence the decision. So this is how, if all of these data points are mined, you can really build a developer data platform, which gives you a very good understanding of who is in the funnel, what stage are they at, what are they looking at, what is their use case, and are they ready for a sales conversation?
Right. And once you have this data intel, right, how can different teams, let's talk about like how can different teams like sort of action on them to move the needle down the funnel?
So what we've seen is different teams play different roles. But if you have a singular view, if you have one concentrated view of the developer funnel, every team can align themselves to this funnel. And this is how you can make sure not every team is pulling in a different direction. For example, let's say you have a view of all the companies, all the accounts and developers who have a need. It is marketing's job to make sure that they discover our product. The right content needs to be out there. We need to be present in the right developer communities. We got to be talking about the topics that developers care about, so that anybody who has a need for my product discovers my product. And this is where marketing comes in. This is where DevRels come in. Let's say people who discover the product, the next step is evaluation. And we've got to make it easy for developers to evaluate the product. Give everything possible. I think one example that comes to mind here is Stripe. So Stripe actually is a masterclass in building developer documentation. And the developer documentation of Stripe was so good that that is what spawned their SEO. You search any question related to payments, and you will invariably land on the documentation of Stripe, explaining how to do that and how to do that using Stripe. So what Stripe did beautifully well is make it very easy for developers to evaluate the product, to see, does the product work? How does it work? Another few examples of best practices here is sandboxes. Sandbox environments are really helpful. Playgrounds, a demo environment. Just make it as easy as possible for developers to evaluate. And that is where product marketing comes in, developer experience comes in. One very common challenge with some of the developer tool companies is developers don't even know what the premium offerings are. So one example from a company we work with, they've written 10 case studies. Each case study starts from the free product and then eventually handholds the developer towards the premium products. So it really charts out the journey from starting with the free version, building the POC, and then eventually when they see the value, moving up to the premium product and then scaling up. So the more content and assets are made available for developers to try out the product, the better the journey is.
I think like these functions need to be more consultative in their approach, right? I mean, that's very important for developers to feel that, okay, fine, I've been fed all the necessary, like, content, education that is for me to like champion the product.
Absolutely. And Mithali, I think would also love your thoughts. How is this different from what you've seen as 6sense for the B2B industry?
Yeah, so when I was in 6sense, we followed a very linear funnel, right? Like there was like I said, there was awareness, consideration, and we would just like have very dedicated roles at each stage. Marketing would come for MQLs, for awareness building, right? Like sort of bombard them with all the content that we have created. And then once we qualify, the MQLs, and then they would give the handover the leads to the SDRs, and then they would like sort of prospect. But I feel that it was a little broken because it was more for like, hey, I want to like increase my MQLs. I don't like care about like what the user is sort of like, wants, or even if they want our product. It's more was to like, hey, we want revenue. Let's like just push them down the funnel. So I think education should not be looked at the lens of revenue. It should be purely for educating the customers about what their challenges are and how your product can be a fit or not a good fit for them.
Awesome. I fully agree. I think one thing we have realized is the different teams need to take very different perspectives.
Yeah.
DevRel really needs to take the developer first perspective. No sales, no pushy sales, just help the developer, make sure they have the best experience. And sales does not even need to talk to the developers. They have no business talking to the developers, emailing them, cold calling them, none of that. Sales needs to come in much later in the journey, and they need to go after buyers. So everything that happens from problem realization to discovery to evaluation to build POC is to nurture an account and make it ready for a sales outreach. When that happens, that should happen to the buyer, not the developer. Emailing developers is probably the last thing sales should do.
Yeah. And even if sales does, like SDRs do email developers, it should be from a lens of like, hey, there's a sales engineer, let us help you like evaluate the product better, right? And only when you get the green flag from the other side is when you push them down for a meeting.
I think now let's come to the point of how do we align everybody on the same funnel, right? Now, if there is a common unified view of the funnel, how all of the teams get aligned is every team has a responsibility to push accounts down the funnel. So if you go back to the previous one, Mithali, I just want to spend some time on the funnel still. So the left part, sorry, the one with the teams. The left part, this is marketing and DevRel's responsibility. People who have a need to find our product. Once they've found the product, those developers need to evaluate the product, be able to build a POC. This is product marketing and developer experience team's responsibility. Once we see people get involved in the product, they need to find out our premium offering. Once again, this is marketing and DevRel. I think this is where teams start to diverge, which we should not let happen. DevRel should be spending time with teams or developers who can eventually become champions, who can eventually lead to a warm introduction to the buyer, not the most vocal. The most vocal participant of the community may not be the best investment of time and effort. We should definitely help them, but qualifying accounts very early is very, very important. Same for marketing. Being very prudent in identifying revenue opportunities. Not every user is a buyer. So identifying where is the revenue opportunity, who has a premium use case, where do we see buyers getting involved, where do we see engagement with an enterprise feature or an enterprise grade product. These signals marketing needs to be very cognizant of, keep an eye out, and then pass them on to sales. And sales gets involved at the right stage. Getting in too early can piss off the developers. It can lead to long sales cycles. Getting in too late might have missed the bus, might have missed the opportunity. So marketing's job is to get sales involved at the right time, when there is enough internal advocacy and there are some revenue signals. So this is how this one singular view of the funnel helps align marketing, product marketing, DevRel and sales. Everybody is working on those accounts which can eventually become buyers and not getting swayed by vanity metrics like number of stars on GitHub. Great, but not great for revenue. Number of people reading the documentation, number of website traffic, good, but does not help with revenue. So everything gets aligned to a singular view, which is qualified by our ICP criteria, qualified by an eventual revenue possibility. And I think this brings us to the last part, which is how should each team align their KRAs and KPIs to this? So we'll just spend 5 minutes on this, and then anyway, this material will be available. But if you think of marketing, the key KRAs are product discovery and awareness, funnel progression, and identifying MQLs. And in terms of KPIs, it has to be the right lead scoring. And lead scoring cannot be based on how many GitHub stars are there or how many visits to the website. A developer reading the blog 50 times might not be an opportunity at all, versus somebody who's installed your product and is checking out your enterprise feature is a much better opportunity. So the legacy way of scoring leads, which is number of hits to my website, is probably not the right way to score leads in developer tools. We have to look at the activities and the intent behind the activity. An NPM install is a much stronger intent. Somebody signing up with a GitHub ID is a much stronger intent. A buyer checking out the product A buyer checking out the pricing page is a much better intent. So I think really what matters here is the right lead scoring using the right intent signals.
So on that point, when we were doing our podcast, one of the things that came up was like a very interesting intent signal was when a developer count goes from 1 to 2 or 3. That is also a very strong intent signal that, hey, more and more people are evaluating your product.
Absolutely, I fully agree. One developer, there's always this confusion. Is this like really a developer hobbyist, or is this a team use case? The minute you see multiple developers from the team, it's definitely a team use case, and it's important enough for that team to commit multiple resources. I think another great signal is if somebody's evaluating your product and your competition. Because again, that shows there's an immediate use case. It's not just curiosity. Somebody's looking for a solution, and that's why they're evaluating multiple products. Docker pulls, npm installs are great signals. Somebody connecting their internal database, or let's say integrating your product with their production environment, that's a great signal.
Yeah.
Moving on to DevRel. For DevRel, the traditional KPIs have always been size of the community. We take a very contrarian approach here. We believe the better KPI here is how many champions the DevRel team has been able to cultivate in the target accounts. And that really aligns the efforts with the ROI. Whether you have a community of 10,000 people who will never become buyers, or do you have a community of 500, out of which 50 or 100 are potential buyers, or at least developers working in target accounts, we believe that is the right approach here. And the KPI should be number of champions cultivated in target accounts, number of warm intros to buyers, really working as like the Robin to the Batman or the sales team.
Yeah.
And I think in some of the teams, and it's a still new school of thought, but in some companies, we have seen DevRel start aligning with the GTM teams versus being an independent function or aligning with the product team traditionally.
Yeah. Because I think they face the developers first, like they are like in the first line of control. So they know every activity that is done, how many activities are there done, the recency of it, right? So there's a lot of great intel that sits with DevRel.
Absolutely. And aligning that team with the revenue team,
Yeah.
overnight it changes the mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
From like developer education for the sake of developer education to cultivating champions and eventually having an eye on the revenue. Moving on to product marketing and developer experience, I think it's a very critical team. The best developer tools have heavily invested in this, and the KPIs to track here are funnel progression. Out of those who discover our product, how many move to an evaluation? Out of those who evaluate, how many move on to start a trial or start a POC? Because this is really what the developer experience team is responsible for. Now, in some orgs, they may not be a dedicated developer experience team. Product teams or content teams double up, but that's fine. They're still wearing the hat of developer experience.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, moving on to sales development and account execs. I think one of the myths that's been busted quite strongly in the last 1 year is till 2022, I think the approach that a lot of teams had was build and they will come to buy. We don't believe that happens. A lot of teams are starting to believe that does not happen. And therefore, absolutely need sales teams, SDRs and account execs to find those hot accounts, to find those buyers and go prospect the buyers. Because developers are great at trying out new products, even using them, building using them. But one thing they're not great at is building an economic case. We actually checked out 100 developer tool companies and their websites, their resource sections. 75% did not have a build versus buy analysis on the website. So why should a developer team not engage two developers to build it? Why should they buy your premium product? That analysis is not available as a resource. And we think that is one of the most critical resources in a sales team's kit. So yeah, I think absolutely critical to have a very well educated and strong SDR team and a strong account exec team where SDRs are responsible for taking the hot MQLs from marketing, reaching out to the buyers, not the developers, working meetings, and account execs play the traditional AE role to close and move from meeting to deal conversion.
Great. And have you seen, because this is a very idealistic, framework, but have you seen, like, when you have spoken to so many dev tool companies, like, where do GTM teams like sort of fall short here, and what can GTM teams do right?
I think that's a great point, Midali. Let me point out the top 5 things to watch out for as a go-to-market team. I think the first one is, the first thing that I've seen most commonly is 90% of the dev tool companies, DevRels, don't talk to sales teams, which is an absolute waste of expertise, because generally DevRels have the pulse of the developer, and not passing that on to the sales team is just leaving opportunity on the table.
Right.
I think the second biggest area of opportunity is not having a visibility of the funnel. Of all the teams we work with, the most steep number that I've seen is, of all the opportunities that Reo identified, only 10% were known to the team, 90% were not known. And the best that I've seen here is 30%. So anywhere between 70% to 90% of the companies evaluating your product, using your product, or in the space in general are not known to the marketing teams, to the GTM teams. So the visibility of the funnel is absolutely missing in this space, and that happens because that visibility is not there in the product signups. Developers don't sign up. They evaluate products on 17 different platforms, and the teams are not tracking those platforms. It's very, very hard to track.
Right.
The third biggest area of opportunity that we have seen is in lead qualification. Almost 9 out of 10 teams are still qualifying leads the way we qualify them for a B2B product. Number of page visits, number of signups, so much opportunity is lost over there. We need to really think what signals matter for my product. And like we discussed, the number of developers evaluating the product. Are they evaluating competitors' products in tandem? Are they doing the high intent activities? Are they checking out integrations which are enterprise integrations, security features which are enterprise security features? That makes a whole lot of a difference for dev tool companies. And not using those signals for lead scoring is the third biggest opportunity that we think teams are missing out on. I think the fourth opportunity that teams are missing out on is SDRs are not prospecting warm accounts. They have a list of target accounts to go after and cold calling the accounts irrespective of whether that account has a need or not.
There's no contextual reaching out, right? There's no intent-based reaching out.
And this is so surprising. You talk to the sales teams, everybody agrees. Yes, intent is very important. Like, let's say I'm a database product, right? I'm a vector database product. Everybody in the GTM team agrees if that team does not need a vector database, they will not buy a vector database.
Yeah.
And still the SDR team is going after a list of 100 companies who may or may not need a vector database. So not using intent for prospecting, I think, is the fourth biggest opportunity. And I think the last one is account execs. And we actually did this experiment. So Reo.Dev's engineering team took demos of 15-20 companies to see, are those companies personalizing the pitch according to our needs? Yeah. I think 2 teams personalized. Everybody else had a very standard pitch. So the account executives are not really using the data of what developers have done to personalize the sales pitch. Yeah. Developers have a very short attention span. If you talk in their language, much more likely for the deal to progress. So I think these are the 5 areas of opportunity we have seen in DevTool GTM.
Awesome. I think that this was like a great eye-opener, and I think at the crux of this lies intent and developer-specific intent signals for DevTool companies, right? And would you like to talk more about like the tools which are out there and how are they like sort of performing on DevTool intent signals?
Sure thing. So I think one thing, Mithali, I'll confess, is all of this is easier said than done.
Yeah.
This is a lot of heavy lift.
Yeah.
And that's why the companies who have really solved it have invested a lot in this. For example, mining data from GitHub is very challenging. It's extremely anonymous. Same goes for any kind of package managers. Um, Developer documentation, we've been talking about it a lot, but it is a very detailed sort of content repository. Many marketing teams don't even understand out of the developer documentation which pages have intent. So it
Yeah.
requires them to sit with the product team, with the engineers in the team, and really understand which pages have intent.
Yeah.
So I think what we've seen in terms of tools that do well in the space, the typical stack for a DevTool GTM marketer is website identification, a tool like a Clearbit that just tells who, which company was on what site, a directory software like a Zoom Info that gives you, or a sales navigator that helps you build a list, and then some combination of these two to just blast emails or ads or cold calling.
I
I
think
think the
that's
best teams,
yeah.
just to wrap it up, if you go back to the slide where we had the logos.
Yeah.
So the reason we put these logos here is we have seen the system that these teams have built in-house. For example, Astronomer, they've built their own sort of command central where all the data is coming in from all of the sources we spoke about. They are also missing some signals, but at least Astronomer is the one that, in my experience, has the most advanced lead scoring. And after that, I think Apollo has done a really good job at it. And what we have tried to do, shameless plug, is just make it easier for teams which are not that big. And I think a lot of the people on the call already know Reo.Dev. So the endeavor from our side has been to bring the same powers to every DevTool company out there, to be able to mine these signals, to mine signals from GitHub repos, Docker pulls, documentation, product signups, and do effective lead scoring to identify or surface the accounts which have real opportunity. So taking a leaf out of the books of these big developer tool companies and bringing that superpower to all the companies in the space.
Awesome. I think that brings us to the end of this session. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them away. Right. We will be sending you this recording post the webinar. Or if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. You have our email IDs. So, yeah.
I think thank you so much, everybody, for finding time for this. We hope this was useful. And I think if you have any opinions on this, if you have something that we can add to this, please do let us know. We would love to incorporate more ideas on this. This is a living document. So yeah, we would love contributions, questions, and critique.